Let's face it, in today's world, you get hit with a lot of news. From the web, TV, social media, Russia, newspapers. Okay, not newspapers, but Facebook. Even your friends and strangers. So it's easy to see why this onslaught of information can be overwhelming and why people today communicate through text and social media. Oh, god damn it, Mario Batali. All you hear again and again are the mainstream talking points. So how do you know who to trust and what you're missing out on? Well, you don't. So screw it. Grab a beer, pull up a chair with me and some expert panelists. We're going to debate, have some cocktails, and learn some new perspectives. Welcome to TPH. So this month you've already heard about Flynn pleading guilty, the escalating situation in North Korea, and the California wildfires. But we wanted to focus on three key issues that are happening now that you should be aware of. And that's net neutrality, tax reform, and actually a look forward at what's happening with human trafficking. But first, a subject that is anything but neutral, net neutrality. So unless you've been living in outer space, we all know by now that the fight for net neutrality is raging. But if you have been living up in the stars, here is a quick recap. At its simplest, net neutrality is a free and fair internet. This means you can, say, watch your favorite Game of Thrones at the same speed as drunk history. And you can easily find your coworker's adorable Instagram account of her rescue dog Jiggles. Look at that guy. Without it being blocked, let's say, by the Dodo Mafia. It's a luxury you don't think about every day, but when it's gone, you just might freak out. So, put your thinking caps on, pop some blood pressure medication, and let's break this down. Currently, the internet is controlled by a handful of internet service providers, ISPs, if you will. Most notably, major players like AT&T, Comcast, and Verizon. Net neutrality prevents these powerful ISPs from speeding up or slowing down certain websites, or blocking them entirely. These regulations keep the ISPs competitive, and it keeps prices at least a little bit reasonable. Without current regulations, however, the internet and all of its piano-playing cats and endless black holes of information glory becomes a hellish free-for-all. ISPs could throttle speeds to create quote-unquote fast lanes for companies able to cough up extra cash, and nothing would hold them back from blocking smaller, perhaps even more innovative competitors. This could also affect your wallet because ISPs will be free to tack on extra charges. In closing, not an ideal situation for businesses, innovation, or the internet consumer. It's up to you, the consumer. What future do you want? And sometimes the best way to process these issues, grabbing a drink. Let's go meet our panelists. Our first guest is a former cybersecurity strategist for the Department of Homeland Security and is currently a managing partner for Darkfield. Please welcome Alex Kreilein. Our next guest has held the position of chairman for the Republican Party in Red Bank, New Jersey. He is currently the co-founder of UPT Strategies. Joining us now, Sean Di Somma. Finally, our last guest has been at FreedomWorks since 2012 as the Director of Policy and now manages the Regulatory Action Center there. Please welcome Patrick Hedger. All right, thank you everybody for coming. We're gonna have a great debate and we're gonna also have a lot of fun. But first, I need a drink. Tyler, what am I drinking?
Hey, today's drink of choice for net neutrality is called Page Still Loading. It's ginger liqueur, a little tequila, and takes forever to make unless you pay us extra money. So.
I don't know if that sounds great, but does anybody else want one?
I'm all right, thanks. That sounds like a Title II drink to me.
Okay, so before we get started,
Free markets, free people.
all right. Before we get started, we have some ground rules, and it's because I believe that words matter. They matter when you tweet, they matter when you speak, and they matter when you debate. And for me, I think it's very important. For some politicians, maybe not so much. I'm not going to say names, but I am like Donald Trump. But our word of the day is going to be provider. If you say provider, grab your drink and take a sip.
Cheers to the providers.
And cheers to the providers before we get started. So today we're talking about net neutrality, and we know what net neutrality is. But what's important is on the 14th, the FCC is going to be voting on whether or not the regulations stay in place. First of all, I'm a bit confused because some people are saying that these rules help small business. Some people are saying that these rules stifle small business. So let's start there. Patrick, what do you think?
I think these rules ultimately stifle small business because when you've seen this type of public utility common carrier regulation applied to basically any other sector in the economy, going from the telephones, which is where you actually had Title II of the Communications Act apply, to the airlines, to the electric utilities, to the railroads and trucking, what you saw was that these high regulatory barriers basically box out competition. And then you have a phenomenon known as regulatory capture, where you've got this revolving door in Washington where the folks that know the most about the industry go into become regulators, and the regulators go to the industry. And you get this collusive relationship in government that forms regulatory capture, and they're able to structure regulations in order to box out competition.
So when you say these rules, though, like, I'm a little bit confused. So these rules are currently in place, right? Mm-hmm. What's being proposed that will be voted on the 14th is a new set of rules, which will be to remove the previous rules. Mm-hmm. What I find interesting about this is that you have a ton of internet companies, like Comcast, for example, who said over and over and over again, we wouldn't do anything to block content, throttle access to content. Mm-hmm. And they've even claimed that they haven't done this at all, ever, right? Even though that Comcast blocked BitTorrent, they've slowed down Netflix, mobile service providers throttle video. You've had AT&T blocking FaceTime altogether. But so if I buy their argument that they've never blocked content, that they've never throttled content, then what's so bad with having a rule in place that says that you shouldn't block content or throttle content? This is the first FCC chairman in the history of the internet that is actually abdicating that the Federal Communications Commission should have any role in protecting consumers and businesses.
Well, that's because that's what Congress said, and ultimately FCC's authority is a delegation of congressional authority, and Congress made clear in 1996 that this is the FTC's beat. They are the ultimate consumer protection agency.
Yeah, but Congress has also rolled back the authority for the Federal Trade Commission to bring suits against telecommunications companies. But beyond that, too, I'd love to hear an answer for how the New York Times, which creates content, publishes content, editorializes content, which is classified as a Title I information service, is exactly the same company as Verizon, Comcast, T-Mobile, or Sprint, who doesn't create content, shouldn't editorialize content, and doesn't actually even provide the content. They're the transportation network for the content. So why would I want as a consumer for FedEx to be able to manipulate the content that I purchase from Amazon on its way from Amazon's shipping and distribution center to my house?
Who's the best to set these reasonable standards? Shouldn't we and now we're still 20 years in, the internet's matured, but we're still in an infancy. Don't we want...
But isn't a reasonable standard, don't throttle, don't block? I mean, that sounds reasonable to me.
Well, when you apply these rules to the extent that the FCC has, you begin, net neutrality. I don't think we do have an agreed upon definition because there are practices that would that count as providers? ISPs.
We'll give you a hat.
Second time, Dave.
Right.
But we'll,
engage in, that actually that prioritize certain content, but that's a boon to the customer. So if I'm using mostly music data or I'm using mostly video streaming, I don't see why there's a problem for that data to be zero priced, if you will, while the services that I don't use the most is subject to data caps.
if you look at polling and surveys, most of Americans like these rules. I think it's 57% of Americans say that they like the regulations. Only 16% of Americans say that they oppose this, which leaves a big gap in the middle. And so if you are going by popularity, the regulation should stay in place.
Well, there's plenty of things that come out of Washington that sound fantastic. There's nothing authored there that really has a very truthful title. Certainly, the Affordable Care Act, we're seeing premiums right now increasing despite the name, despite maybe initial popularity. So in these net neutrality rules, I don't think Americans would like their internet service to resemble the old Ma Bell monopoly. Sure. right? Where, I mean, you had regulatory hurdles to change the color of the telephone, right? And I mean, the biggest change in the telephone when it was regulated as a Title II telecommunication service was switching from spin dial to push button. And I mean, it took forever. I mean, it took deregulation of the Ma Bell monopoly to get voicemail, to get call waiting, things like that. That's not the speed that we want the internet to be generating new
I gotta jump in
innovation.
here. This is really interesting because what you're saying is that companies should have a reasonable ability to make choices, right? And that it should be left up to those companies as to what is reasonable or not. But what these companies are asking for is actually inherently unreasonable, and here's why. In the Open Internet Order, as passed by the FCC in 2015, they have an entire section that says you are allowed to treat traffic with a reasonable standard of network management. If I'm downloading Lord of the Rings in HD in the middle of Times Square and there's an emergency, I should be able to be dethrottled, potentially even blocked, because it is getting to the point at which my actions are unreasonable because it's a shared resource, right? What the telecom companies are asking for now is that they be able to do things that are inherently unreasonable. They're given an out to be able to say, we want to have a purple, a yellow, a green, a blue phone, but we don't want to have just a purple or a yellow or a green phone. So your example turns itself on its head when these companies come together and say, hey, we want to be able to act inherently unreasonable. But more than this, it's not just a Netflix versus
What
somebody
unreasonable
else
thing
did.
are you accusing them of doing?
Well, I mean, I think it's unreasonable when you get companies who step in and block content or throttle access to content. Everybody wants to use the Netflix proposal, right? Like, well, Netflix has a lot of bits that flow with the internet, and so it needs to be potentially throttled back by these companies, right? I think what's more interesting than that is, Kaiser Permanente, when they want to do remote medical surgeries. Are they going to throttle bits on mission-critical arthroscopic surgeries to patients on the table? What about cybersecurity companies who protect our nation by throwing billions of bits around the internet every single second? If they don't have a special deal with AT&T or Verizon, are they going to have to pay more money to be able to provide cybersecurity services to the federal government?
Well, what you're basically saying is that these large companies out there that right now have the ability, what's unique about an internet service provider is you go into any store right now.
Provider.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, oh gosh,
gotta
I'm pulling
drink.
the hat trick today. You walk into a store, there's a good chance they might not have the product that you want, but now you have a market where these IS or internet companies are able to basically provide their customers with whatever product or service they want access to. I mean, it's the ultimate customer service model. And so just because a company could behave badly doesn't mean they will.
But they've proven that they have.
In very sporadic cases that were again, the BitTorrent one was solved before that, with Comcast, was solved before that even reached litigation, before it even reached a final decision.
So
from
your
the
answer is
FCC.
antitrust, right?
So antitrust is one of the components that are there, but
So we should
ultimately,
break up these companies if they do bad things.
I don't think we should break them up. I think we should lower the local regulatory barriers that exist. I mean, you have collusive relationships between ISPs, local governments. You have local governments that are basically saying, we're going to double our poll attachment rates because we have a good relationship with the local ISP.
Because I have so much choice in which ISP connects to my multi-dwelling unit.
Yeah, there's no denying that there is a competition problem in the ISP market, but you have hundreds and hundreds of wireless internet service providers with as many as 4 customers.
Providers.
Oh my gosh.
That's 2 in a row.
Can you name more than 6 wireless service providers that serve the entire country? I'm
Wireless
happy to
service
train for that.
providers. Well, so, I mean, not off the top of my head, certainly not. I mean, maybe Metro PCS, T-Mobile.
They've been acquired.
They've been acquired. Verizon. I mean, there are a number of different ways to access the internet, though.
But I
because you
believe
have
that the
wireless
statistic
internet
is that just under 50% of Americans only have the choice between 2 providers.
Right. And under Title II rules, what you see is that becomes limited to 1. Because when you apply monopoly-type regulation, you're going to end up with a monopoly.
It's not a monopoly-type regulation. The FCC forbade away from almost 2/3 of Title II. In fact, the court even said that in order for you to have net neutrality, the district court in, I think it was 2013, after Verizon and after Comcast sued the FCC, right, for trying to regulate them under Title I, the court said, no, you have to move to Title II if you want to do this. And then they said, sure, we'll do that. But Tom Wheeler, who's a venture capitalist, much like myself, decides he doesn't want to destroy American investment. So he says, let me roll back and forbear from many of the monopolistic areas of Title II.
So, but you're placing the internet's future in the word of a bureaucrat that no longer holds any power.
I'm placing in the word of the law, which is what this country is governed off of.
All right, so the last thing I want to talk about here is a new segment that I went out and shot. What I want to do is find out what people are saying on the streets. And so on the National Day of Action, I grabbed Hex. We went out on the street to Bryant Park, and we talked with the protesters there to find out why they're for net neutrality. The battle lines for net neutrality have been clearly drawn. On one side, the Federal Communications Commissioner, Chairman Ajit Pai. Joining him, AT&T, Comcast, Verizon, and T-Mobile. On the other side, companies like Google, Facebook, Twitter, Amazon, Uber, Netflix, Airbnb, eBay, and the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops, National Council of Churches, National Advocacy Center for the Sisters of Good Shepherd, and the majority of the American population. I headed to Midtown Manhattan to one of the protests to find out what people think.
Why are you so passionate about this? I mean, it's a generation that was raised on the internet.
The beauty of the internet is that anyone can create, anyone can get their voice out, everyone has an equal platform.
So just who are the foot warriors of the pro-neutrality battle?
And are you one of the organizers?
No, I'm not actually. I'm just a random high school teenager that just came and got a little excited.
A lot of the people here, all these people come from our school. I mean, I have some friends across the world that I met on.
Have you dated? Have you found good dates on the internet?
No, not yet.
As I stood there, I realized, where are all the baby boomers?
Oh, here we go.
I was with Occupy Wall Street.
I've been protesting, I think, since I came out of the womb.
Are you guys going to go show these kids how to protest?
So why is the next generation so concerned with this?
The reason why we're protesting with memes is that we're trying to show the best of the internet. If the internet is dominated by big companies, we will never have beautiful things like this.
We work for a tech startup, and in the tech startup community, we want to make sure that the internet remains open.
And young people understand what's at stake. It's not just about speed of the internet. It's about freedom of speech.
Yes, freedom of speech. A fundamental American right. Companies like AT&T, Comcast, Verizon, and T-Mobile have all used their right to the freedom of speech in this fight, spending over $500 million lobbying against net neutrality just last year. But hey, not all freedom of speech is equal. In fact, some pretty mean things have been said about Ajit Pai.
You know, the internet is a good way to communicate with people.
What's your sign say?
So my sign is it's a meme. It's who would be a better chairman, Ajit Pai or Barron Trump?
I have to ask you, is it fair to use Barron in this?
I've actually gotten some fire for this.
Like just last month, protesters included his children in their protest poster.
We don't condone that. We don't want to be angry at you. We want to be happy. We want to kick back and watch the videos together. So please, Ajit Pai, please, act with your heart, act with your brain, and please be a decent guy.
See, even he knows the right thing to do. Standing amongst this youthful group of net neutrality activists, I couldn't help but think policy is made by those who show up. So where do you stand? On that note, I want to hear your guys' final point on this.
What I think is extremely important going forward is if we're going to make decisions on how we're going to regulate the internet, let's not create this Frankenstein of old regulations and we're going to put all this stuff together and kind of go along as we come up with new innovations.
Okay, Alex.
I think this will have a very frustrating but very unfelt impact for the first 3 to 5 years. And it will be frustrating because it will hamper the ability for investors like myself to have certainty that the companies that we provide money to will not have to use the money we gave them to pay other companies, right? It takes a while to devise and hatch a really crafty and screwy scheme to be able to ingest internet fuckery, which is exactly what these companies are attempting to do.
Patrick.
I like to think of the internet as like a supermarket, right? There are the companies out there, the Comcasts, the Verizons, are building the walls of the store. And you know, net neutrality is basically the government, you asking the government to come into that store and make sure there's enough shelf space for Cheerios, because you don't want your access to Cheerios blocked, and you don't want that Safeway or whatever company to sell a brand, a generic brand Cheerios on a larger shelf space at a lower price. There's no systemic market failure there, and there wasn't a systemic market failure for the 20 years that the internet was regulated on the rules that we are going back to.
On that note, because you seem pretty confident that these rules are going to be rolled back, let's take a look into what could be our future.
Good afternoon and welcome to the first annual Post-Internet Neutrality Race. I'm Brad Bynum.
And I'm Jay Smith. That's right, it's the race that shows you what the internet speed would look like if we didn't have net neutrality. And just like when a white woman finds out there's no guacamole, it's total chaos.
We're lonely. We have an incredible lineup of runners today, the best in the world.
That's right, we have Netflix,
Amazon, TMZ,
Pornhub.
Okay.
Then we have Craigslist.
Craigslist is so poor, it's scratching out Google and writing in Craigslist. It wishes.
So poor.
And Bing. Who is using Bing?
Apparently no one.
Not a chance.
I'll Google it.
Well, the race is about to get started. Here we go. And they're off. No surprises here as Netflix takes the clear lead.
Yes, heavyweights like Netflix can afford to pay internet providers, so they'll obviously be in the faster lane of service.
110 million users sharing 2 passwords.
How the fuck do they make any money?
Haha, no idea. Look out! Make a quick break for it is TMZ.
Netflix, excuse me. Hello, yes.
Chill out, TMZ, you're creepy. And here comes Amazon.
Classic Amazon, speeding by, delivering packages, and collecting everyone's personal information.
Give me a password!
Fun fact, Amazon just bought Whole Foods. It's only a matter of time before they buy us all.
We're all robots.
Yes, we are. Well, don't look now. Here's my sleeper hit to win the race. Craigslist. Yep, right now Craigslist is maintaining pretty decent speed, but is slowing down to sell old shoes and tickets to Billy Joel at the Garden.
But no, once again, Amazon dominates the playing field. Have you seen Transparent?
No, why do you always ask me?
Gotta watch it.
Oh, look out! Coming out of nowhere is
Pornhub!
God, we love this
Love
site.
that site.
Big fans.
Big fans.
Pornhub is ramming to the lead, but is going soft after remembering that nobody's actually ever paid for porn.
No, they haven't. Wait a second, speaking of falling way behind, in fact, it looks like he hasn't even moved. It's Bing.
Oh, Bing.
That is the slowest lane yet, and for some reason my parents will probably still use it.
Old people. They're almost dead.
Crazy.
Wait a minute. Bing looks like he's finally loading. Oh no, it's the dreaded pop-up blocker.
Wait, actually, he's just buffering. Whew, annoying.
He's stuck. And they're coming around the finish line. Here's the final push.
Hold up, the company that is controlling everything, Variant T-Cast, they're stopping everybody at the finish.
Of course they are. They're asking everybody for money, otherwise they can't continue. And Amazon and Netflix are the winners. Of course they are. Craigslist is still trying to push the Billy Joel tickets, while TMZ is offering rare nude photos of Larry King. Disgusting.
What am I supposed to do with Larry King's balls?
And Bing took his own life.
It's about time.
He's dead. Well, now there's only 2 internet companies left.
Coming up next, Amazon presents Netflix, presents Amazon in an Amaflix production. Jeffrey Tambor, starring in Orange, is the new Transparent.
And that is the first annual Post-Net Neutrality Race.
Cheers.
Cheers, you guys.
Provider.
And now let's dive into something that obviously is something you never want to talk about at parties or holiday events, taxes. But again, first, Tyler, I need a drink.
In honor of tax reform, we're drinking Death and Taxes. It's bitters, splash of soda, and whiskey that's been filtered through 10,000 pages of tax loopholes.
That's nice. That's good.
Well, to death to taxes.
That's right.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Which in the United States are combined.
Yeah.
State tax.
One thing.
It really
That's right.
is.
I'm all about efficiency. Do both twice.
Well, really what I want to talk about is the fact that this tax bill that's going forward in both the House and the Senate, it seems like every single day something new pops up that I'm trying to figure out what it is. It's happening really fast, and now it is in convention. Conference. Now it's, there we go.
No, it sounds like a convention.
It sounds like a convention, but it's in conference, which means that it's progressing forward and we don't necessarily know what's in it. So let's break down. Who are the winners and the losers of this bill?
I would say the losers are any company that relies on government favoritism through subsidies, tax expenditures. Congress is very good about favoring industries by not cutting them a check, but reducing their tax liability for very specific industries. I mean, there's a subsidy for racetrack owners. There's subsidies there's a special tax loophole for rum producers in the Virgin Islands and in Puerto Rico.
I agree with that one. I'm going to say I'm a fan.
But there's a lot of companies that are, live and die by these extenders every single year, and they've basically created a cottage industry in Washington, D.C. every single year lobbying for expiring government tax programs. What's really great about this tax bill, and there are things in this tax bill that aren't great. There are things in this tax bill that are. I think the good outweighs the bad, but the good part is I think Americans are rightfully concerned that maybe some corporations are getting an unfair shake while they're getting taxed at 30 or 40%, and a corporation is paying effective 0% tax rate. A lot of that goes away because of this bill.
What loopholes are going away? I haven't heard of many loopholes going away, except for that some companies can bring back their offshore money for zero taxes. That doesn't sound like it's being harsh on the corporation.
Yeah, I don't think it's at 0% that they're bringing it back. There is a penalty.
Very low tax rate, right? Like you can bring over billions of dollars that you've been keeping offshore and paying no taxes on, and you can set up a shell entity, which is legal, right? I mean, like it is the law that you're allowed to do that. But you can set up an entity and call it a corporation and bring it all back under that for a couple of points. I mean, you can also then gain compound interest on that you put abroad for however many hundreds of years you wanted to do that. That's an exaggeration, of course, but you're taking money, you're sticking it abroad, you're protecting yourself from a downbound tax liability, and you're bringing it back for very little. And it just doesn't seem fair.
Well, I mean, is it fair, or are we falling victim to the Nirvana fallacy here a little bit? Because
the band?
Well, no, not the band. But to the extent that...
the band was amazing.
Yeah. To the extent that we want this money repatriated at some point, and if you cut a deal where you say, well, you can bring it back here, but it's a 50% hit, they're not going to do that.
But in general, this tax package is very good. It's not perfect. Would have loved to see a larger cut. We've got the SALT issue, which, I'm a New Jersey resident. The biggest losers in this are going to be the blue state governors, who are on TV and crying and moaning and speaking in the most pious terms possible about how the Republicans are screwing over their citizens when them and their ilk have done it for 30 and 40 years in California, New Jersey, and New York. Guess what? Your chickens are home to roost. Why are people in Florida subsidizing your tax increases, Andrew Cuomo? Why are they subsidizing your crazy tax increases, Jerry Brown? This is so they're going.
Why? Because the state of Florida is half made up of New Yorkers who fly there for half the year. Florida should subsidize this.
Your ID should work in both states. It's just more efficient.
All right, and on that note, it is time to take a commercial break.
Welcome to New York City, the financial capital of the world. Many companies have been hiding their money in tax shelters on tropical islands.
But now, the government is offering a one-time tax on companies' monies overseas if they bring it back to America. Did you know that Apple has $261.5 billion overseas? Do you know where my iPhone charger is? So if you want to hide your money in an offshore account,
But not too offshore.
look no further.
Just, seriously, look right there.
Right there. Hi, I'm Vinny.
And I'm Jimmy.
And at Pizza and Investments, we'll help any corporation hide their money in beautiful, sunny Staten Island. The Cayman Islands is made up almost entirely of beaches. Staten Island is made up almost entirely of back hair.
Just like Bermuda or the Cayman Islands, Staten Island is filled with beautiful resorts ranging from 1 star to 0 stars.
With a variety of exotic island cuisines, like pizza.
Pizza!
And of course, don't forget, pizza. Yum.
The population of Staten Island is made up of the NYPD, the Impractical Jokers, and actual pizza. And once your money's here, it's protected by the Staten Island law enforcement, the Wu-Tang Clan.
Hey look, cocaine.
And it's the safest place to hide your money since no one ever comes here.
It's simple, companies. You give us your money, we put it in a pizza box, and we take it on the Staten Island ferry.
Hey look, cocaine.
And once we have your money, we'll hide it safely all over the island. Don't take our word for it.
Rich New Yorkers love it. We will help hide your money in a pizza box that no one will ever find. Here, we'll just practice. Yeah. Take that, you put it, put it in the pizza box, and then we help hide it for you in Staten Island.
That's a really good idea. I'll think about it.
Think about it. Here, take that. You think about it.
Yeah. Why don't you think about it? Am I right with the cash?
What comes to mind when you hear the word Staten Island?
It's like a prison.
A prison.
A prison.
Right.
Island,
And where's a safer place to hide your money than a prison?
Sir, have a slice. That's how good you are.
Oh, but I'm okay right now.
Yeah, you should need this. It's not good.
So-called pizza and investment.
To repatriate your money to America's favorite almost island.
Think about it. Why don't you think about it?
Hey, why don't you think some more about it?
Why don't you sleep on it?
Why don't you
give it money?
So we're back, and we have Maryam Ishani. She is a correspondent at Karma. What I want to do is we've talked about what's happening with the internet. We've talked about taxes, which are things that are currently happening in our lives, but there's stuff that's happening that we're not talking about, and we should probably expect to in the near future. Sure. So January is Human Trafficking Month, and Maryam has been working on a story for Karma for the last few months on human trafficking, and particularly the business of human trafficking. So I wanted to talk with you about what your findings were, and really just give us a quick summary of what your episode is that you're doing.
Sure, absolutely. So I wanted to look at the numbers because this is one of those things where it's really, really hard to get very good information because victims are not going to raise their hand to be counted. Mm-hmm. So looking at what exactly constitutes modern day slavery and the trafficking of persons was just incredibly difficult in the first step that we had to take in looking at this episode. And there's really two big numbers, I would say. And it's honestly these two numbers. You either will hear 26 million, 26.7 million, or you'll hear, which comes from the International Labor Organization.
And that's people that are trafficked.
These are people living in modern day slavery. So they're either trafficked within their country, or they're trafficked around the world, trafficked from state to state in the United States, or being kind of forced and held in captivity in their own town. It doesn't matter. But the conditions of their labor and their life is what they look at. And that's either 26.7 million, according to the International Labor Organization, or there's a second number that's a little bit higher, that's about 40.2, 40.3 million. And that bigger number really reflects the inclusion of children that are forced into marriage or children that are forced into combat. This is a $150 billion a year industry. People are making that much money off the sale of humans.
We've talked about some really intense issues today. We've had a lot of fun. I want to finish out with what you're cheersing about right now. So, Patrick, what are you cheersing to?
Friday, Star Wars comes out, which will either unite this country or bitterly divide it.
I was going to be upset about your cheers. Now I like it.
Yeah.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Sean.
I happen to be more of like a rock fan, an alternative rock fan. So there's a band called the Gaslight Anthem. They have an album called 59 Sound. Yeah. 10-year anniversary. It's a masterpiece. Everybody should check that out if you haven't heard it. You know, it's a little different, but cheers.
Cheers. Alex.
So the 2018 midterms, which should be pretty interesting all around, no matter what your political affiliation is. Here's to shake it up.
I think we'll do better than you think.
Okay, so I'm going to represent Canada.
Oh, all right.
Season 2 of The Crown is out.
Yeah.
I haven't watched it yet, but I'm really excited about that
on the third
because
episode.
like no one loves the royal family like the Canadians. And on top of that, we have a royal wedding in 2018. I mean, it just doesn't get better. I'm a little heartbroken we lost Harry, but
yeah. This is a rough one.
Cheers.
Love it. Okay, well, it wouldn't be a show today without addressing that there was a terrorist attack or a bombing in New York City today. Only 2 people were injured so far, and the NYPD responded fast, and there wasn't a huge disturbance in New York City. And so my cheers is that we have one of the best law enforcement and emergency responders in the country, and every single emergency responder, I want to just thank them and also thank the resiliency of New York.
NYPD.
Cheers. Cheers.
Absolutely. Okay, well that is it for this episode of TBH. You can follow us on social media. I'm at Tamara Lane on Twitter, and that's it, guys. Thank you for being here.